Hi everyone, this is Andrew Macko. Hopefully you're all doing well today. I'm here to give a short presentation on an issue that I think is very important in the modern era of sports, in particular college sports. If you're a fan of college sports, this is something that you may have already been familiar with in some way, shape, or form. But what I'm going to do today is give you a little bit of information on the topic, tell you what I think about it, and hopefully you can draw your own conclusions from there. With that, I'll go ahead and get us started. And we're talking about the case for paying college athletes. And essentially, we're going to answer the question of why, in the modern sports era, should college athletes finally be paid? And to really get started with this topic, I think we should really start with how much these athletes are worth. And in the modern sports climate, college athletes are worth billions of dollars to universities, but they really receive no monetary compensation. Essentially, they're making these schools a huge sum of money, but they're not really receiving any benefit of any type. Really, all they're getting is a scholarship. That's the only real tangible asset that the school gives to these kids. Now, it's great that they get a free education, something that in a lot of cases maybe they couldn't afford, but the amount of that scholarship does pale in comparison to the player's true market value. And in the past, the players were described as amateurs. But however, in the modern era, the demands placed upon these players is more akin to an employee-employer relationship. Essentially, these kids are spending 50, 60, 70 hours of their time a week on the field, watching tape, playing games, practicing, everything. They're spending so much time doing that there's so much little time left over for their school, and then even if they can find a job, hardly any time for that. And we have here a little bit of information. And this shows essentially the market value per player for different schools and the value of their athletic scholarship. And we'll go to the bottom half of the list there. We'll stay with Michigan, something a little familiar. For the football team, each player is worth roughly $466,000 to that university. And the value of their athletic scholarship is about $23,000. And as you can see, the difference is about $442,000 to $443,000 in value that the university is gaining that the player is not. And to back up that point, Sean Gregory of Time Magazine states, quote, "Players are essentially working full-time jobs while going to school. They deserve to be paid more than a scholarship because even full-ride scholarships don't cover the full cost of attending school. Athletes are often short a few $1,000s for ancillary expenses on top of tuition, room and board, books and fees, money for gas, and even small things like shampoo." End quote. And really to get a true understanding of how this has gotten to the point that it has, I think we need to go over a short history of the student athlete. It really started in the late 1800s. It was really designed more as a draw to bring in new students. Something for that they could go to school to enjoy while they were there to watch these games. So the attempt was really just to use the games to bring in new students and increase the money that they made through tuition. However, by the early 1900s, within 50 years, the sport professionalized. They had huge stadiums. They were selling, obviously, concessions, things like that at all these games. So a huge portion of that money came directly as a result of the play on the field. And by the 2000s, college sports, in particular football, have become one of the largest profit centers for universities. And another major point is that college football coaches' salaries have jumped 70% just since 2006 to an average of $1.64 million. And in comparison, we have the athletic department revenue versus scholarship expenses. It's an average in this particular graph of the 10 largest revenue producing schools. And as you can see there at the top, that blue line is the revenue made per student, or I should say per team for each of these schools. On the bottom in orange, you see the athletic scholarship expenses, how much you're spending on these students per year. And the average here is that in 2014, about $12 million per scholarship expense. And the amount of money that they're generating through revenue is about 144 to 145 million. So as you can see, where it's doubled in terms of revenue in the past 10 or so years, they've barely increased by a few $1,000,000 for the scholarship worth per player. And now a major problem that has also arisen because of this is the rise of illegal funding, players getting money through illegal means because they cannot afford things. One of the first major examples, and I'm sure plenty of Michigan fans will be familiar with this, is the Fab Five. And they were in the 1990s a very famous team, a very influential team that played for Michigan and they were very celebrated. They saw much success. But however, in 1997, it was discovered that a booster, who was basically someone not associated with the school, who's paying players to come to play for a team for their own personal gain, named Ed Martin, had paid several players on the team, and also several players in the years that followed. This caused the program to be placed on probation. Several athletes, including Chris Webber, who's one of the greatest players in the school's history, had to face several bans where he couldn't even come back to the school. So it's done more damage and hurt more people that there's been no money legally allowed to be given to players because of the need of these players to achieve money in some way, shape, or form. Another great example is SMU football. They were given what the NCAA calls the death penalty in 1987 and 1988, which essentially means that they disbanded the program. So coaches lost jobs, players lost their ability to play. It just hurts so many people, and it makes no sense that this is happening when you could easily find a way to legally pay these players. And even today, legal funding still exists. In the last year even, a major example is Laramie Tunsil. He was a 5-star recruit for the Ole Miss, which is Mississippi, their football team. And he joined a class with a number of other 5-star and similar recruits. The odd thing was that it was a school that never had a huge recruiting following. They never had a lot of great classes like this, so a lot of people had a raised eyebrow due to this. And in 2015, it was discovered that he had illegal contact with an agent, and he was suspended 7 games that season. Now, this is probably because he was attempting to find some way to maybe get money, look into joining the NFL, things like that. And during the 2016 NFL draft, when he was drafted, he had his text leaked, which revealed conversations between himself and a coach, setting up payments for different things, car payments, rent, even payments for his mother's rent and utilities. And again, if he had been allowed to be paid legally in some way, shape, or form, you would have to expect that this illegal way of going about it would never have happened. Another major example would be Ohio State. They had a tattoo scandal about 5 years ago, 2010, 2011, that forced their coach to resign, and they had to vacate all their wins that year. Again, another situation where having a system in place could have caused things like this to be avoided. And now there are some opposing viewpoints. People have some strong opinions the other direction, people who defend the current system as it is. They say that student athletes are paid by way of free education. And while that's true, I think we've already established that free education is not worth nearly what that player is worth on an open market. And a lot of people say that they've made this decision. They've chosen to be an amateur. And in some cases, that may be true. Some guys do want to go to college, get an education while they're pursuing their sport. But in reality, rules prevent players from heading directly to the pros in a lot of sports. In particular, basketball, there's a year. In football, you have to play for 3 years. There are some other options. You can go play abroad in Europe or Asia, things like that, but it's not a possibility for all players. And it's really just a headache to put it on these kids when you could really just make a way for them to go to school and still make a little bit of money so that they can survive. And the last major opposing viewpoint that I've heard is that paying college athletes will cost universities too much money. And really, it's ridiculous when you think about how much money these universities are making off the players. Perhaps they could give them 1%, 2% of the cut. It just doesn't make any sense. And even then, they could use stipends, which is essentially almost like a gift card to players. They can redeem them at school-run organizations. So essentially, the school will be able to get them food, get them clothes at a cost that is minimal to them, but a maximum full value to these students. And now we just have to weigh the options. Now, the pros of this are athletes can afford necessities such as food and clothing. I don't think that can be argued. That is a huge thing, and these kids really need, in a lot of cases, that they don't come from a place that they have money. They need the opportunity to be able to get the necessities that they have to have. And then allow programs to operate on a more level playing field. Essentially, the big schools like in Alabama or Florida or Michigan won't have any advantages because those schools have more fans. There's more people who might be willing to pay a player at a big school than at a small school. Having a stable financial situation will also keep the players from interacting with these illegal boosters. When there's a lot of desperation, when you need money, you're willing to do more to get that money. If they don't need the money, there's a lot less likely possibility that they're going to approach these boosters or allow these boosters to approach them. And the reduction of this potential legal activity will take the pressure off schools. They won't have to focus as much on watching out for this legal activity. Instead, they can focus on other important issues. Perhaps concussion seems to be a hot button issue right now that could be something that they could spend more time doing. And there are a few cons. I mean, there's no guarantee the structured pay system will end the illegal booster activity. I mean, there's really nothing you can do to end someone's free will to do something like that, but I do believe that it will go down with payments being made in a legal way. And the implementation of such a process will not be cost-free. Obviously, it's going to cost the schools some money, but as we've seen, they make such a high profit that there's no reason to think that they wouldn't be able to pay these students and still make almost as much money. And really, the solution to me seems simple. I think that all evidence points to need to have these students be paid. It seems to make sense. It's helpful for everyone. There's really no major drawback to paying the students. There's many options. I think stipend is a great way to start. It allows them to pay the students, but also at a minimal cost to the schools. So you're not hurting anyone. And it's a positive for both. It's a win-win for students and the school. And I think most importantly, this will help to protect players from association with illegal activities. I think when you really get to the heart of the matter, it keeps the athletes safe. And honestly, isn't that what we should really be concerned with? Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure bringing this information to you. Have a great day.